You're listening to the Humbucker Soup podcast with Kevin Chisholm. If you love guitar pickups, pedals, and parts, you've come to the right place. So sit back and enjoy the ride.
Welcome to Humbucker Soup. In part one of our Lindy Fralin interview, we broke down how underwinding and overwinding impact your tone, the pros and cons of Alnico rods versus screws, and why a good, clean tone is the foundation of a great guitar sound. Today, we bring you part two. You are really going to love this episode. We'll talk about no-load pots, Lindy's custom blender control, and the secret behind his single-coil-sounding humbuckers. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and be sure to give us a review. It helps us to get the word out. So, Lindy, we were just talking a few minutes ago about the Steel Pole 42 and the Steel Pole 43. And what I wanted to ask you about is if you could just kind of give our listeners a sense as to how those two particular pickups differ from each other.
Okay. Well, the Steel Poles are made in any of the Fender styles, Jazzmaster, Strat, and Tele. So the difference between a 42 and a 43 is really only how many turns of wire and what gauge of wire. Mm-hmm. If you want a brighter version, you're going to use it with 250K pots. You want the 42. It has less turns, lower ohms, and it'll work with 250K pots. If you do the 43, you're getting closer to a real Gibson P90. And they're a little darker.
Is it correct to say that with the 42 and 43, the reason why you have more or less turns is because the 42 is a thicker wire, so you just physically can't put as much wire on the bobbin? Is that correct?
To a degree, although we're not really filling them up. It's about sound.
Okay.
If you want a brighter version of this pickup, but it's still beefier than a regular Alnico style Fender. But if you want a brighter version, you use less wire, and the 42 just sounds better when you're using less. It's, got lower ohms for the whole pickup.
Okay.
43 is for people who want a little more beef, and it does get a little darker when you add more turns. They are the same magnet structure, exactly the same, though, either version.
And so for the 42, you recommend a 250K pot, and for the 500, you recommend for the 43, you recommend 500?
I don't always recommend 500. I just make them aware that it's a darker pickup, because I always say the right pot is the one that sounds the best. It might be a 300 that sounds the best to somebody. And heck, if they have a maple topped Fender, they may still use it with a 250.
I think that's the thing that's funny is I know I went through this when I was much younger is sometimes guitarists get stuck in their head that there's like a, ohm police, that if you use a 250K pot with a humbucker, they're going to come knock you. You can't do it. It's against the law. And at the end of the day, if that's what works for you, if you like it, then that's the right pot.
That's so true. What got the first guitar I ever put the steel poles in and what inspired me to make them was I had a custom made Strat. It was an ash body. And on a whim, we used Coca-Cola for a fingerboard. That stuff's hard as marble. Not only did the guitar have a back bow from putting the tangs in, it's so hard it wouldn't compress. It took about 2 years for those necks to straighten out, but they sounded harsh with this Coca-Cola fingerboard. So that's when I, came up with the idea of putting the steel poles together for that. And it worked in that guitar. So that's the one, if you see the steel pole video on my website, that's the guitar they're in.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, it's perfectly good guitar now. It also had jumbo frets and everything about it that made a guitar brighter.
Okay.
The ash body, the bigger frets, and the denser fingerboard. So they work perfectly in that guitar, and they are, in fact, 250K pots. I think I have a Telecaster that is just ash and maple, and it does have 500K pots. But that's because that's what it needed to be bright enough for me. I like a bright wound string. I've always been attracted to that. So even if I'm going for that beefier sound, I still want bright wound strings.
Do you think that no-load pots have a function somewhere in the world, or is that kind of just more of a theoretical thing?
No, I think they do. Although I don't know that it's as important on a tone control, but that's all our blender pot is.
It's a no-load pot?
Yeah, when it's on 10, it's infinity ohms. As it goes to 9, it comes in about 240, 230, and goes down to 0. So, but it's used to blend two pickups together by basically shorting the two hot wires to each other.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because usually when I think blender pot, and a lot of the blender pot wiring diagrams I have seen or conversations I get into, it's all about blending in a pickup that isn't in the natural flow of the switching. Like I have a typical tele wiring, but I have a middle pickup now and I can blend in the middle, and that's very cool and people love that. But I noticed that your blender pod, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of a balance control between two pickups.
Actually, no, what you said first is how the blender pod is. The switch has to be in one pickup, and then the blender pot brings in the other. You still need a switch.
Right.
They make what you're talking about, and some bases have them. It's like the balance on a hi-fi stereo.
But what I meant is that it seemed like with your blender pot, like when you're on 5, you get both pickups, and then when you go to 10, you get one, and when you go to 0, you get the other.
That's actually not true.
Okay.
That's how a balance on a stereo works. Ours, if you have the switch in the neck position, ours will gradually bring in the bridge, but the neck is always on 10.
Okay.
And you have control of the bridge pickup. If you want to do it the other way around, you put the switch in the bridge. Now it's on 10. You can gradually bring in the neck. You have the ability to do everything you said, but you got to move the switch.
Okay. Okay.
And, some people do use like you said, set up a tele with Nashville set with just the neck and bridge on a switch with their own volume and tone, and they'll have a middle on its own volume. You would have to have a 3-knob control plate or a rear routed tele to make that work because you need 3 knobs now. But
yeah,
the blender pot really is just an infinity K pot, and all it's doing is gradually shorting 2 hot wires together.
Okay.
Sounds complex, but it's easy to use. The way I use it all the time is put the switch in the strat bridge position and gradually bring in the neck with the blender pot. Because when it's on 10, it's out of the circuit. It's just not doing anything.
Okay.
I came up with that just because most strats don't have the neck and bridge as an option.
Exactly.
I like that
tele sound.
I like that sound. And I saw a guy who had put a mini switch in his tele because he had one of the first teles I've ever seen with a strat pickup in the middle. We're talking about 35 years ago. A humbucker in the neck, a strat middle, and a tele bridge. His name is Mike McAdam. He's still a professional player in Nashville. And he had a micro switch to connect his neck and bridge now. I said, well, if you can do that, you could do it gradually with a pot. It turned out it doesn't work very well with a regular pot, because they're always blended. They never are quite even I put a 1 meg in there and it had a funny taper and it was never quite out of the circuit. So that's what I used to take these pots apart and scratch the little carbon element.
Okay.
And then after we made them for about 10 years, we realized that CTS will make anything you want if you buy 5,000. Anything.
But with the blender pot, you also get the ability to get all 3 pickups. That's another.
That's true. That's very true. You put in either of the in-between positions, you're now bringing in the 3rd pickup gradually. Okay. And I use it all the time. I like this. One of my favorite sounds on the Strat is a bridge pickup on full and bring in just a little neck, because it makes the bridge less snarly, but it's not as funky as the 2 and 4.
And now, 30 Seconds with Ed.
Hello, my name is Ed Malaker, and in the next 30 seconds I will explain guitar shielding. You may have heard of shielding, and we've talked about several different methods to shield your guitar here at Humbucker Soup. When you shield the guitar, you coat the surface of the electronics cavity with a conductive material that you connect to the ground. This material traps incoming RF interference and shuttles it to ground, so it doesn't get into your audio signal. This noise is especially noticeable with single-coil pickups. Unfortunately, shielding your guitar will not remove the noise created by single coils, but it could reduce it. Shielding works best in guitars that use humbuckers, but still get some noise from RF interference leaking into unshielded wires. Coating the electronics cavity with a conductive material connected to ground or using a shielded wire like Gibson guitars can eliminate the problem completely.
I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about your single-coil-sounding humbuckers. I feel like that's a really fascinating area of your product line.
Okay.
The first question I had was that I think to a lot of people, they may think that the P92 visually is simply a twang master with screws instead of rods. And I don't think that's quite the case. And I wanted to ask you how those two pickups differ under the hood.
Okay. Well, all of those on the single coil sounding humbuckers part of that page are basically because I just never liked humbuckers. And what's going on with the humbuckers, you're picking up a full inch of the string. They're just a very inarticulate pickup. By doing that, by picking up that much of the string, you're kind of canceling the short wavelengths, which is all your sparkle. So humbuckers might be the best pickup on earth for dirty playing, because all those low mids, crunch chords, and the extra bright treble strings cut through the mix. But when you're playing clean, they just always bothered me. So once I figured out the physics of why they have dark wound strings, I started figuring out ways I could undo it. And certainly the P92 is the very first one we made.
Oh, really?
In Twang Master.
Okay.
They are 2 3-pole coils. Just one is like a split P90 and one is like a split Strat.
But they straddle the same magnet, is that correct?
Well, in a Twang Master, those are the magnets. There's just those 6-pole pieces that you see is all there is in there.
Okay.
And there's nothing in the other kind of the area of the pickup that doesn't have any pole piece. There's nothing there. It's like a P bass under there.
So the Twang Master is basically a single coil split in half.
That is right.
Okay.
With Alnico rods, Alnico 5. And so it is like a P bass made for guitars. That's a good way to visualize what's under the cover.
Okay.
And the P92 is just a P90 version of the exact same pickup. Screws. Now, it does have bar magnets underneath.
Right.
Because anytime you have screws, you got to charge them up with something.
Okay.
There's always magnets underneath either a blade or a screw design pickup. Alnico is the only magnet that pickup needs. So there's just 3 in the left pole, 3 in the right pole. And but again, you know the difference in them sound-wise is one's like a P90 and one's like a Fender. Alnico sounds so different from a row of screws.
And I wanted to also...
that's the first one we did, because now you're picking the string up one place and you have that brighter wound string that I always liked.
And it seems like I think a lot of people sort of minimize or don't even think about the very dynamic you're mentioning, which is the amount of string you see. Of course, the difference between humbucker and single coils obviously is 2 coils versus 1, no doubt about it, or screws versus the rods. But it's also the amount of string you see. That's a dramatic difference.
It is the best pickup for dirty, because you don't hear the dark wound string when you're crunching chords. And the extra bright treble strings cut through a mix for soloing. So that's why it's the most popular pickup as you get into overdrive all the way up to metal. There's no better pickup for the design, for the sound you're looking for. It's just when you're playing clean that I had frustration. I liked, I wanted a Strat because I was a Hendrix fan from the first time. From the first time I heard him, I had to have a guitar. I loved music before that, but I was 14 when Hendrix died. So I wanted a guitar, though, when I first heard Hendrix, because those, not only the power of his music, but the tone he got when he played clean, I just wanted a Strat. It was a few years before I got one. My first guitar with paper out money was a Mustang. Best I could do. I didn't have much money back then, so. But yeah, and all the humbuckers that are on the single coil sounding humbucker page, they're all on this page because that's the size they are. You mentioned the Sunbucker earlier, the Sunbucker Blues, the Twang Master P92. We also make a big single, which is the same bar magnet that like gold foils have. So it's very single coil, but it's a little fuller and not quite as bright as Fender's. We use a 2-coil design, so that's either a Firebird cover or a full-size humbucker cover, but that's somewhere between the Twang Master and the P92.
Well, I was always kind of curious about that when I think about, I have both the full-size big single and this big single.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Oh, yeah. I pretty much have every one of your pickups. I'd say other than I don't have any Jazzmasters or Jaguars, but as far as the humbuckers, the humbucker size single coils, Strats and Tellys, I have most. So a big fan of those. And with the big singles, I always wondered, because I'm not going to open it up, if the full size big single is just a bigger version of the big single mini, or if they differ in other ways.
It's not. That's a good question. The pickup was designed for mini humbuckers, because I was never a fan of mini humbuckers either. Same thing as a big humbucker. They had dull wound strings and bright, thin treble strings. Mm-hmm. So once we realized we could get those parts, we started experimenting with what can we do to make me like this pickup. And we had already been making our Humcanson P90, which is what that is under the cover, is 2 sideways coils, each picking up the same thing as a single coil would pick up, because the magnet structure is the same on a Humcanson P90 or a P90. We had 2 sideways coils, and I said, I could do this, just put a bar magnet between them. And the first prototype I built worked. So we had to tweak the size of everything and what kind of bar magnet. So that's all that is a bar magnet down the middle of that pickup cover, mm-hmm. with 2 coils, one on each side. And it really was designed for Firebirds. Once we were making them, we realized it wouldn't be any work at all to put them in full-size covers. It's exact same pickup under the cover. See, it has about a 2 1/4-inch bar magnet, so it'll work for really wide spacings.
Okay.
It doesn't matter where the string is, or if it's a bass pickup or a 12 string. Since it's a bar magnet. The only downside of that pickup at all is there's no adjustable pole piece. So I'm guessing if you put it on an old Fender with 7 1/4 radius, it wouldn't pick up the center strings as loud. So, but you put it in a Gibson with a 12, no one hears it.
But for the big single mini, which looks like a Firebird pickup, would you say it's the same? A Firebird pretty much works the same way, or they're not really the same kind of pickup?
Well, Firebird has bar magnets in each coil. I think that was Gibson's attempt to get a Fender sounding humbucker. And to a degree they are. They're cleaner than most other Gibson designs, but you're still picking up the string 2 places.
Okay.
They're closer together than a full-size humbucker, so the cancellations are have less impact on the pickup. But there's still bright treble strings and slightly dark wound strings. So I thought of this design, and it worked really well. Still just as hum canceling, and there's plenty of people who love Firebirds. I'm a fan of Johnny Winter, and I never ever thought it compromised his tone. But I'm just that person who wants bright wound strings on everything.
I'm kind of the same way. Now it's time for Ask Humbucker Soup, where we answer questions submitted by listeners and readers. We're with Aaron Cheney, Marketing Director of Warmoth Guitar Products. Hey, Aaron, this question is about headstocks. So the question is, some right-handed Stratocaster players use a lefty neck, so the headstock is reversed. Is there any practical reason for this? Does it change the guitar tone, or is it just a cosmetic choice?
I don't think it changes the guitar tone at all. I think it could change the feel of the strings, because on a typical six on a side headstock like a Stratocaster, you're taking that length behind the nut, which that longest length is usually the high E string, and you're putting that on the low E string now has the longest length behind the nut. And I find that the longer length you have behind the nut and behind the saddles on the bridge, the harder it is to bend, because you've got a longer overall length of string that you've got to move. So I think it can change the feel a little bit. I don't think it changes the tone at all. I think it's mostly a cosmetic choice. And one thing to keep in mind is from Warmoth, you can buy right-hand reverse necks, which are exactly the same as left-handed necks, except we put the side fret markers facing up. If you just use a left-handed neck, they'll be facing the floor and they won't do you any good at all.
If you have a question for one of our experts, we want to hear from you. Just send an email to askhbs@humbuckersoup.com or send us a message via our Facebook page.
If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, then head over to humbuckersoup.com for deeper dives from our experts to guide you in your pursuit of the ultimate guitar tone. Once again, that's humbuckersoup.com. See you there.
I noticed with your website, in one of the ways that it differs for me from a lot of pickup maker websites, is that a lot of other pickup makers, the thing they seem to emphasize the most, or the thing you see first, is how many famous people use their pickups. And with your website, to me, the overall emphasis is on the ingredients. For each product page, you really go out of your way to explain very clearly what the pickup's made of, what the options are, and why these particular ingredients will make this pickup sound that way. So for me, there's always this emphasis on craftsmanship. And I was hoping you could just tell us a little bit if that's intentional or just a reflection of the way you work.
Well, I guess it is. Our focus is on sound. We also want the website to really clearly steer people to the right pickup. So we don't say every pickup is perfect for blues, jazz, metal, ska. We try to be honest about what the differences are and the weaknesses of each one, what they're best for. But so much of the hum canceling designs are due to customers asking us, do you make something that doesn't hum in this shape or this size? Mm-hmm. So a lot of that is also what our customers ask us for. But yeah, I guess we all do consider ourselves craftsmen, because in no way is anything ever done or a decision made to make something cheaper. Mm-hmm. Alnico made in America costs 5 times what it cost in China. And all of our covers are made in Nashville, metal covers. Okay. Whenever possible, we're buying American-made stuff. And it's not because I'm nationalistic. It's just better. The quality is just so consistent and better. I'm quite certain that anyone from Asia or anywhere else could make great stuff. I think they're forced into making it cheaper. And so they're forced to cut corners. Because I own 2 Eastman instruments made in China, and they're superb instruments. One's an upright bass and one's a flat top acoustic guitar. So anybody in the world can make great stuff. Some of the best stuff in the world comes from Japan right now, cameras and all kinds of things. But we do take pride in what we do. And there's never any pressure on any of my guys to work faster. We're doing our best to get the stuff out the door, but you can't do things faster or subcontract and hope to get the same quality.
And I also noticed that you mentioned that you make every pickup by hand. And I was wondering if there's a reason why, for example, I'm not suggesting this, but there's a reason why you don't stock up and say, hey, we sell so much of the pure PAFs or the modern PAFs. Let's make a whole bunch. And that way, when orders come in, we can just get them out the door. Is there a reason why you only make the pickup when it's ordered?
To a small degree, we actually do stock up on just the coils you can wind. Once you're set up for Strats, for instance, I do try to fill all the invoices that are old, plus extras for a shelf. But then the guys at Leeds and Wax and Shippers just work on whatever's the oldest. So the winders do some of that assembly line theory. I will do Telly Necks for 3 days sometimes, because I'll have 50 that go on invoices, and I'll put 36 on a shelf. And so it takes me a couple of days. So to a degree, we're trying to be as efficient as possible, but we don't have the room to. We're always behind. We can't stock up on, for instance, humbuckers. There's too many options, and one guy makes them all. Bill's been with me for 20 years, and so he can wind a lot of coils. He'll pick the invoices that have all pure PAFs. He'll wind all the coils as an assembly line as he can be. But then he builds them all, and everything is, in fact, done by hand. Winding coils, we're not holding the wire in our fingers. So we're not saying we wind them like the girls at Fender did. But we are guiding the wire back and forth. My machines have what looks like a doorknob on the front, and I'm guiding the wire back and forth because random layering improves the sound.
Mm-hmm.
Seymour Duncan calls it scatter winding. It's not that sloppy, but it's not perfectly neat either. And so there's a recipe for every pickup we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I much prefer to do, like I said, 80 tele necks, because I have to change the machine to do a jazz bass.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a recipe for everything we do. We are, to a degree, trying to be as efficiently as possible. In a perfect world, a manufacturer would, in fact, just make the products, and someone on the other side of a shelf would take them off the shelf.
Right, exactly.
We can't keep up with demand right now. We're a 9-person shop, and we make an enormous amount of products. So we're as efficient as I know how to make us. But it's still, right now, it's taken 2 or 3 weeks to get products out the door. This whole pandemic has made it so we can't hire anybody. None of my guys want anyone new in the building. We've worn our masks, and we haven't let people in except our delivery drivers, and they're all wearing a mask. So no one I know has gotten sick. It's been a hell of a year.
Yeah. Has it had an impact on your business as far as sales?
To a small degree, because we lost most of our music stores, but our online sales went up. So we're not suffering like a working musician.
Okay.
Plus, lucky for us, we've always been mail order. We were always under 10 people. So the governor of Virginia never shut us down.
Oh, okay.
He shut down storefronts and people with 10 employees early on.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't affect us. So we took it very seriously, of course, and always wore the masks and did everything right. And it's, as luck would have it, that turns out you won't get this disease if you take precautions.
Exactly.
None of my family, friends, or coworkers has had this disease. But we all know somebody, friends of friends, who have.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to also mention that one of the, besides being a tremendous fan of your pickups, one of the reasons why I also love your website is there's kind of a blog built into it, but there's no actual button that says blog, but there's these articles I started coming across, which I think are all made by Tyler. Correct me if I'm wrong. And
Tyler has brought a lot to the company. And he enjoys working with computers, whereas I don't like computers at all. I've worked with machines my whole life. I've never done anything but work with my hands. And so I appreciate a well-designed machine. And to me, computers have planned obsolescence built right into them, and they never work right 2 days in a row. And so I fight with him. He's a computer genius, in my opinion. And he enjoys doing those articles. He's a great photographer. He's taught himself how to do, manipulate the website, build, add photos, and he enjoys putting the graphics up. We bought the software so he can do those diagrams.
Okay.
He's learned how to do that self-taught. So I can't tell you how much difference it made in the company. We love that stuff. It brings traffic. All those free information.
Well, that's the thing, is that they're so well written and they're just so helpful. And I think it's one of the things that really sets Fralin Pickups apart from a lot of other companies, is that it's not just all about selling pickups. You're just giving a ton of great advice to guitarists.
Almost all of it is the exact questions people ask me. So I always work with Tyler on what needs to be done next, but he's the one who can do it on a computer, not me. I'll do email, and I enjoy, photography on a computer, but when the thing doesn't work, and I don't know why, I always have to go get someone, won't print. Or I've clicked on this 4 times and it's not doing anything. Computers just do that constantly to us.
Yeah.
And I even have Macs, and they should behave, but it seems like even those have planned obsolescence built into them. When they're 4 or 5 years old, nothing works right anymore.
Level Up with Tyler Connaghan. What's going on, everyone? Today, I want to talk to you guys about getting high-fidelity tones without an amplifier. While we all love the sound of a roaring amplifier, sometimes an amp isn't necessary, especially when it comes to recording. Take Nile Rodgers, for example, who would plug straight into the board to get the most hi-fi and percussive clean tones that he could possibly get. Some songs like Bowie's Let's Dance or Daft Punk's Get Lucky are great examples of this hi-fi tone. You also have several players, bands, and musicians such as Wilco, The Beatles, Steely Dan, and Spoon who would plug straight into the board to get a unique, clipped, fuzzy preamp tone. One great example of this is Revolution by The Beatles. If you're looking for these kinds of tones, I would highly recommend plugging directly into your preamp or interface and adjusting the gain depending on how much drive you want your tone to have. Plus, once you have your DI recording ready to roll, you can use virtual amplifiers to experiment with the sound. All right, guys, thanks for listening, and that's been another segment of
Level Up with Tyler Connaghan.
But I think one of the things also that you're known for is that, and I've had many people say this to me, is that they say, well, you know, if you call at the right time, you ask the right question, you might even get Lindy on the phone. And I know that I called once and I asked a question, and I was not intending to disrupt your day, but I had a question. And the woman I spoke to said, well, hang on a second, I'll get Lindy. And I was like, wow, you know, and we had this brief talk, but you answered my questions, and it was just really not only helpful, I didn't get this feeling that you were trying to rush me off the phone. And I wanted to ask you, you know, does that ever get to the point where it's just overwhelming, or is that just for you part of your business model that you're willing to talk to customers?
Well, it's actually pure selfishness. Like I said, I don't like computers, so I like the phone. And I have a nice, expensive headset it's wireless, it's got a noise-canceling microphone, so I can wind coils while people talk. And so the truth is, I'm just being selfish. I don't want to do email. We get as much as 100 a day sometimes. I got 3 people who have to spend a third of their day answering email.
Wow.
And some of it's fully intelligent, and some of it's just, you know, just bizarre. I get people who tell me what color their amps are and how rare they are, and, you know, or tell me I play blues, jazz, funk, ska, rock and roll, and what pickups do I need? I don't know. I get all kinds of crazy emails, but I have a nice headset. It's actually, when I'm winding coils, it's really repetitious. So the phone I enjoy a lot of phone calls. Some people tell me funny jokes. Others ask very intelligent questions, and I'm able to help them quicker than if I tried it by email.
Sure. Okay.
And sometimes you have to kind of coax their questions out of them because they don't really know how to ask the important question. So if I wasn't on the phone with them, we wouldn't get to the point.
Yeah.
I actually, it's purely selfish. I like the phone, and I can get information back and forth faster and more efficient.
That makes sense.
And it's really never taken away from my day. The only thing that's frustrating is sometimes I've got somebody on hold before I can finish this call. So I'll come in the morning and have 20 people I need to call back, and it takes till the next day to get it done. I'm on the phone all day.
Oh, really?
But I don't mind. To me, it's my job there. You know, where I'm turning screws or soldering wires or something, it's not taken away from productivity usually.
Okay.
Whereas if I have to answer emails, I have to stop winding or building pickups.
Okay. And do you still actually build pickups that people purchase, or are you more involved in the ownership aspect of it?
I wind a lot of coils for the Fender styles, but I also fully assemble the split SPs, the wide range humbuckers, and right now mini humbuckers.
Okay.
And we'll all share. You know, one other guy winds them because his machine is better set up for minis, but I'll assemble them.
Okay.
And so yeah, I'm building pickups or turning coils, winding coils all day.
So, you want to hit the road with your band. You want to drive around the country playing sold-out shows and getting hammered every night as everyone worships you as the rock god you think you are. Time for a reality check. Touring is a serious business that takes planning, hard work, and a serious commitment. Are you sure you're ready? I'm here to help.
Joe Boult, Guitar 911.
Before you start teasing your world domination tour on social media, here's 5 things you have to think about. Number 1, why are you doing it? Will touring really benefit your band? You might be packing the local club, but building a following further afield can take some time. What's really more important to you and the band? Dependable crowds and guaranteed pay locally, or putting in the sweat, equity and sacrifices needed to build an out-of-town following? Either one works, just make sure you have a clear goal in mind. Number 2, is your band ready? Is the lineup solid? Does the drummer have a wife, a kid, a mortgage? Make sure every band member is ready to make their tour their number 1 priority. This includes stepping away from day jobs, family, and even relationships for a few weeks at a time. Furthermore, is your stage show ready? Look, if the singer's still hiding behind the mic stand and you're losing a staring contest with your fretboard, you've got work to do. People are paying for a show, so make sure you give them one. Number 3, what venues make sense? Where are you going to go? Do you know which venues are favored by your demographic? Man, do you even know what your demographic is? You're putting a lot on the line, so figure out which venues make the most sense for your band. If you're a jazz fusion band, you really don't want to accidentally book yourself at the local rock bar. And remember, pay to play never pays, especially in a new town where you don't have a following. Number 4, are you connected? Everyone knows social media is a must for any emerging band. It's an open opportunity to share gig footage, show dates, and most importantly, a place to keep all of your fans up to date and invested for free. So make sure your accounts are organized, updated, and filled with compelling content, and not just your favorite memes. And when you promote the next gig, for God's sake, do not forget the time and the venue. I know, it sounds like a no-brainer, but rookies forget. I did once. And finally, number 5, getting paid. Whether you're trying to make money, break even, or just have a good time, it is crucial to be clear about your finances, because tours very quickly become financial black holes. And in 2021, ticket sales and merch are probably how you're getting paid. So make sure you're clear on what each gig pays, and make sure the strongest negotiator is the one making the deals. Now with merch, a single color logo t-shirt is a great way to start, and it keeps the price down for you and your fans. If you wanted to do something more complex, I mean, go for it, but invest in great design and quality t-shirts. Now what about selling music? Everybody streams for free, but when people come to the merch table, how can you get them to reach for their wallet? Are your fans more likely to buy a CD or a vinyl album? Know your fan base and tailor the merch around them. There's a ton more to think about, but the bottom line is, be realistic. You only get one shot with a new audience, so make it count. Until the next time, I'm Joe Boult from Humbucker Soup, and I'll see you about.
Well, Lindy, before we go, I had one more question I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind. So my final question is, as a guitarist, when you plug in each day, what kind of guitar do you play? What pedal do you play through? And what amplifier do you use?
Let's start with amps, because that's the easiest of those 3 questions. Okay. I like blackface Fenders.
Okay.
I have 3 Princetons, a deluxe reverb, a Vibrolux reverb, and a Vibra reverb. And for each one of them, just I've never had better amps. I don't play dirty very often, but they all sound good dirty too. I have a couple of Tweed Deluxes and a Tweed Gibson that I like. I have a 4.8 Maestro that came with reverb from 1961. That's a good amp. But if I had to only have one, it'd be a Fender. And I truly think that's the greatest amps ever made, because they also last. These are 60-year-old amps and they still work. You know, and I've had some. One of my Princetons was a kit, and it's already had trouble. Not the transformers blowing, but you know, the pots get scratchy. New pots aren't made as good as old ones. New tubes aren't as good as old ones. It's hard to get a tube. Old tubes, you know, were meant to last 30 years. Some of them are 50 years old in those old amps.
Well, Lindy, I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure to get to know you a little bit. and to learn more about Fralin Pickups, which is an amazing company.
Well, this has been a real pleasure. All your questions were intelligent and fun to answer. You know what you're talking about.
Well, I really appreciate that, Lindy. Well, thank you for making my day, and thank you for taking the time out to spend some time with us with Humbucker Soup.
Well, thank you.
You've been listening to the Humbucker Soup podcast with Kevin Chisholm, produced by Jay Sosnicki, music and audio production by Tyler Connaghan. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Humbucker Soup.